All right, today we're going to learn about functions in Python. So functions are, not that complicated. Um, they just really are a logical collection of code that you can use anytime you want to in your program or in another program. So we're going to just talk about how that gets accomplished. So um, very interesting. We're going to learn how to call functions, how to define a function, and how to import a function. Those are three important things to be able to do. We'll also talk about returning a value from a function and what that actually means. And then we'll conclude this lesson with a discussion on what variable scope is. Variable scope is a pretty important concept to understand, and it can help troubleshoot a lot of problems. There's many built-in functions. So there are built-in functions that you'll find all over Python. And there's libraries of functions that are built in that you can use as well. And I think I've shown you already places you can go to get access to those. So for example, print is a built-in function, right? That is a built-in function. I'm going to go ahead and save my file here, right, by the way. I'm going to save this file, myfunctions.py. That's what I'm going to save it, because I'm going to make a library of functions in here. So I'm calling this myfunctions.py. But just so you know, there are built-in functions like print, and we've used those. And you should know that you've got the function name. When you call a function, you type in the function name followed by the list of parameters. Etc. Right? Parameter 1, parameter 2, etc., etc. Also, if you call a function from another file, you got to type the file dot the function name, and then put the parameters in. So you can call a function from another file by typing the file dot function name. Of course, this is dependent upon. This requires the import command being done before that, and I'll show you an example of that so you can see it. You can also set a variable. So a variable can be equal to a function return value, which is really cool. For example, x. Well, let me comment this out. X can be equal to, a function and whatever value comes back, right? So I can make x equal to whatever the function returns. So that's pretty interesting. You can also, there's a principle called embedding functions, which you absolutely can do. So you can embed functions pretty easily. So for example, I could have function A, right? And then as the parameter inside function A, I can put another function B. And inside function B, I can have the parameter function C, right? So you can get really crazy with that. But you get the idea. So you can have different functions can have, you can embed functions within each other, which is an important concept. Now you get a little confused with this, but always remember, values are processed inside out. So function C's value would be processed first, then function B's value, then function A's value. So values are always processed inside out. Just always something you need to remember. Python is inside out. Okay. A major part of Python is building your own functions, creating your own functions, not the built-in. So we're going to talk today about defining functions. This was about calling a function, and now we're going to talk about how to define functions. All right, so let's create an example. So we're going to go ahead and let me print just some hyphens here, just to indicate where we're coming from. And then we're going to define, actually, I don't want to print that. Never mind. I don't want to print anything. So we're going to define a function, and we'll call it my product. And it's basically going to be a basic math function. So my product, and my product is going to require two input parameters, x and y. And then all functions must, you define them with a semicolon. And all the code underneath the definition needs to be tab indented. And I've talked to you about the theories around single space, double space, or tab indentation. I always do the tab indentions, primarily because programs like Sublime automatically do that for you. So now I'm going to say z is equal to the integer of x multiplied by the integer of y. Oops. So the multiple of x, the integer of x multiplied by the integer of y. And what am I doing here? I'm crazy, making all sorts of mistakes. Okay, so then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to print the value of z. So this is my function, right? So I'm done defining the function. So what's cool about this is I can now call this function anywhere I want to, right? So let's go. Now I'll print my little line. I'm going to print my separator line here. I'm just going to create a little separator line so I know this section of the code is starting. So now I'm going to type so I've created this function called my product. So before I use the function called my product, let's first get some input from the user so we can get the values for x and y. So I will go ahead and, so I'll say get input from user. Okay, so we'll call this the multiple can. I think that's the actual official math term for the number you were going to multiply something with. So how do you spell that? Multiplicand. I think that's right. If I'm wrong, oh well. So then I'm going to take some input from the user, and I'm going to say, please enter the value of the multiplicand. Right? And then I need the multiplier, right? I think that's the technical term for the number I'm going to multiply the multiplicand by, right? Multiplier. So input, please enter the value of the multiplier. Perfect. So now I'm receiving input from the user for both the multiplicand and the multiplier. These variables have nothing to do with the function. These variables are just new variables I'm creating with text input, with just text input from the user, string inputs from the user. And these have nothing to do with anything in here. Where it counts is when I call the function. So how do you call the function? Well, I'm simply going to say and notice that Sublime already recognizes, because this is a Python program, Sublime already recognizes that the my product function exists in this code already. So I'm going to do my product, and then my product requires two parameters. Do you see that? So my product requires two parameters. So I'm going to supply those two parameters into my product. And the first parameter I'm going to provide is the multiplicand, comma, then the multiplier, right? So I'm running the my function product, the function. I'm providing the my product function, and the my product function, I'm submitting the two input parameters. And what I'm doing is providing multicand and multiplier, which is what I got from the user. They are effectively going to become the x and y inside this function. That is all you need to do to call the function and run it. So let's see what happens with this code now. I'm going to save my code, my functions.py. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my command prompt, and I'm going to run Python my functions.py. And it says, please enter the value of the multiple can. All right. So I'll say 10. Please enter the value of the multiplier. I'll say 10. It's 100. Oh, that's great. So let's try it again. Let's just do one more for fun. I'll do 7 times 77. There you go. All right. So we're able to demonstrate now the ability to create our own function, define it, and then call that function. Okay. All right. Pretty exciting, huh? Now, there's a better way to do this, right? A much better way to do this. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and comment out all of this code right here. And I'm going to actually copy this code. There's a better way to do it. And the way to do it is to create another file. So I'm going to create another file. So this is going to become my function library, right? So that's what this will become. Everything I'm going to put in here are my functions, and I will call the functions from another file. So I'm going to paste in my code here. I'm going to file save as, and I'm going to save this as my function call.py. So this is where I'm going to call the functions, right? So now this is interesting how you need to do this, because we must first, let's get to this later. First, you must import the functions that you want, right? So I have to import them. Now, my functions is a .py file in the same directory as this py file. Some libraries you can call that are part of Python, but in this case, I'm going to import, and I'm going to import the my functions, the my functions.py file created. Now you don't need to put a .py next to this; it'll recognize the name. So I'm importing my functions. So my functions are going to be imported into this my function call.py. Now I can go ahead and remove my comment codes here, and I'm going to go ahead and we want to see now if the code will work. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and I need to make sure that my function library is saved. And now I'm going to run the my function call.py. So we'll type Python my function call.py. And I made a really funny mistake. I removed the comment from an actual comment field. So we got to fix that. So let's save that. I was actually looking for another error, and I got a different error. So now I'm done with that. Let's go ahead and actually not try to run plain text in our Python code there. So my function call.py. Okay, please enter the value of the multiple can 10, multiplier 10. Oh, but I get an error. So let's see what's, it says error, name my product is not defined. So this function is not defined. Well, that's because I have to use, there's a convention to call a function from another file. And you have to put the file name in front of it. So how would I do that? Well, I would say my functions dot my product. So I'm calling my functions, and I'm saying dot my product, right? And that my product is now being called from here, right? So let's see if that works. So now I'm going to save my changes, and let's see if I run Python my function call.py, what happens? All right, I'll try 10 and 10. All right, it's working now. So very good. So I'm able to run my simple math call. I called my simple function from one file. Using the import statement, I was able to use the functions from my function library that I built. Okay, pretty neat, huh? So that's actually, you start to see how to organize Python code in a better way, right? So very good. Let's go ahead and move on to another concept. In fact, one of the major concepts I want to show you is that you can very easily now, in fact, I'm going to get rid of all this code because I now have it in there. We can also now just define a series of functions that I may want to use at another time. So let's say I want to do an exponent. There's an equation you can run to get an exponent. So my exponent. And same thing, I need two values to do my exponent. And I'm going to say that z is equal to integer of x. And to do an exponent, you simply do two asterisks. That's how you get an exponent. Integer of y, very good. And then I'm going to print z. All right, so this is how we do another. So let's see how that works. So I've now got that, I've got the exponent there, so I'm going to save this change. I'll go to my function call, and so now how would you call that from, I mean, how would you do that? So right, let's go ahead and do our little hyphen thingy. And also, while we're at it, I'll just print some blank space. So we're going to print, oh, wrong slash. We're going to print some blank space there. And so let's go ahead and now get more input from the user. So I'll say the base number is equal to the input, is equal to whatever the user puts in here. So please enter the base value. Okay, and I probably should I should probably use the same quoting methodology here. There we go. Oops. All right, and then exponent. Input, please enter the exponent value, right? I think you understand what I'm trying to do here. Now, I'm ready to make my function call, right? So I will do my functions. And notice that Sublime recognizes my functions now. See that? So my functions dot, and here I'm going to put in the name of my new function, which is my exponent. And then I'm going to take the base as x, and I'm going to take the exponent as y. Pretty cool. Let's see if that works. Let's see if I can call two functions from the same function call file. So I'm going to, well, make sure I save my function definition, and we'll save my function calls. And now let's go ahead and try it, and let's see what happens. All right, so I'm getting my first one, which is the multiplication one. And now I'm getting the second one, which is enter the base value, let's say 2, and I want 2 to the power of 10,024. Very good. So I'm now able to do exponents as well as multiplication. So I'm well on my way to building an interesting little library, right? So that's pretty exciting. Okay, that's pretty good. I think that's all I needed to share that with you. Now, there is something interesting going on here. In fact, I want you to realize that one of the most powerful things that you can do with Python is take a value, take that value, set it to a variable, input that variable into a function and have the function change that variable and return a value back to the user. That is probably one of the single most powerful things that you can do in Python that's really easy. It makes Python really good for manipulating text files, for manipulating basic equations, and for changing, rapidly changing something so you can get the output that you want. Usually, like when you get input from a user, you need to output something based on the input from that user. Python can parse through that very rapidly and quickly and do a great job. However, there is something you must be very much aware of, and we call this variable scope. So variable scope is a very important thing to understand. So let me just give you another function library here. So define my value, and I'm going to set my value is equal to x. Oops. And then I'm going to say x is equal to this this is what the value of x has been changed to, right? And then I'll print x. Okay, so simple thing. I'm going to get one input called x, and then I'm going to make x equal to something else, and then I'm going to print x, right? So that's effectively what's going to happen there, right? So now let's go to, let me save that, and let's go to the my function call, and let's see what happens. So I'm going to say x is now equal to, this is the value of x originally. Okay, so this is the value of x originally. And now right after that, I'm going to call the function, I'm going to call my, dang it, my functions dot my value. And I'm going to put in there the value of x, right, which I've just set. Then I'm going to print x. Now, pause for a second and try to, I'm going to save this file, and I'm going to run this file now. So let's take a look. I'm going to run this file. I've set x equals to the value of x, to this value right here. And then I'm going to run the my value function, and that value of x is going to come here, be set to this, and I'm going to print x, and then I'm going to come back here and print x again. So can you think of what would happen? So pause this video and just think for a minute. What's going to happen? Well, let's go ahead and try it, and let's see what would happen. So I'm going to call my normal file, and I'll have to go through my thing here, right? So let's see what it said here. It said, this is the value of x has been changed to. So so that's this print x, right? X got printed here. So that's that x. So this is the value. So this print x showed this value of x. But let's look at what else happened. So then the next value of x, when I printed x here, what shows up? This is the value of x originally. So when I set x here is equal to something, and I printed x, the x being referred to here is this x. It's not the x inside the function. And this is very important to understand. It's called variable scope. Variables only have a scope. The scope they have are within the function they're defined in. And so this variable right here has the scope of this particular Python file. And by the way, x, because Python is a procedural language, x has a value in this file only at line 18 and longer. X did not have a value from line 1 to 17. X only got a value after line 18. In addition to that, the X value here has nothing to do with the X value here. And also, you'll notice that X has an internal value too. The X value up here and the X value here had nothing to do with the X value here because they have the scope within their own function. So it's very important to understand the variable scope of variables because you can get really confused as to what is printing, what is set to what value And sometimes you'll get errors you can't define, and then you'll realize it's because you thought that the variable would be available to you and it wasn't. Um, as programs get larger and larger and larger, variables are used everywhere, so it can become quite confusing. All right, thank you. That's our lesson on functions, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.